Okay, so today is Wednesday. It's week 3, and we're actually going to start today. I'm going to here's what we want to do. We're going to just go over again how to connect our PHP page to our database. We'll kind of talk through that process. And today's all about retrieving or selecting data. We talked about the acronym CRUD last week, that most web applications, they're really just programs running in the browser that perform CRUD, create, read, update, and delete operations. And probably the most common one of those is the read, retrieving data from the database so we can display it in the browser. That's probably 85% of the CRUD operations we do on the web are reading. So we're going to do that today. We're also going to look at how, once we've read data out of the database, how we can integrate with different kinds of HTML so that we can manipulate how the data that we query from our database, how we display it. We can show it in a grid, we can show it in a list, we could show it in a dropdown. We've got lots of options. So we're going to play around with some of those different options today. We're going to implement Bootstrap just to give our little gaming site simple CSS. Did you guys, I think I asked you this, but I couldn't remember the answer. Did you work at all with Bootstrap before last semester? Did Scott introduce it to you? Or is that new? If I remember correctly, you've seen it a little bit. No? New? Okay, thanks. So Bootstrap is kind of like a pre-built CSS library. It was originally developed by some designers at Twitter, and it's new. So the cool thing about Bootstrap is it's a great way to add some CSS quickly and easily, to add some basic styling and layout. And also it allows us to make our sites mobile responsive without spending a lot of time in writing custom CSS, which I know is the focus of some of your other courses. It's not a focus on our course, so it's an easy way for us to add some CSS to the PHP work we're doing. So we're going to do that, and I'm going to give you lab 1, which will be due next Tuesday at 5 o'clock. And that's for practicing with reading and displaying data. So I'm going to go over the lab requirements now, and I will show you what this should look like. And I can show you a sample as well. So for lab 1, here's what you need to do. So you're going to select data from your database and output it in a grid of rows and columns using HTML table tags. And we're going to do this in class today. So the lab is really just a chance for you to then kind of take what we do in class together, and you're going to do it on your own. Okay? So first thing you're going to do is connect to the VPN using OpenVPN if you're a Windows user, or TunnelBlick if you're a Mac user. You're going to connect to your AWS database in MySQL Workbench. We did it last week. We'll do it again in class today. You can also find the instructions on Blackboard under Weekly Learning Tools and Resources if you need step-by-step instruction. You're going to run this SQL command. You're going to replace your DB name here with your AWS database name. And then you're going to build the table called relatives. And relatives is going to have 4 columns, an ID, which will be auto-generated, name, age, and occupation. Okay, so this will build an empty table in the database when you run this code. I'll show you a sample of the finished product in a minute. I then want you to run this command, this insert into relatives, and you're just going to replace the name, age, and occupation with each member of your nuclear family, so parents and siblings, or other people in your household. So you might include grandparents or your pets. You need to see who your pets are, who's a dog person, who's a cat person, how many pets you have. So again, also this is also, we're kind of serving 2 purposes here. You're working on your PHP, and I'm getting to know you guys a bit better. Because we're going to be together a lot for the rest of your time here at Georgia. So if you've got, let's say 1 sibling and 2 parents at home, you would run this command 4 times, once for yourself, once for each of your parents and once for your sibling. And just put in their name, their age, and their occupation. Okay, so you'll run that SQL in the database, and that will populate, that'll add some records to your relatives table. You then need to build only one PHP file for this. Just call it lab1. And this page is going to display an HTML table with a header and then a row for each member in the relatives table. So we're going to use a loop. So if there's 6 relatives in your database, your table will have 6 rows. And your table should have 3 columns. You need to display the name, the age, and the occupation for each member of the family. You don't need to display the ID. So first you can test your page out using XAMPP or MAMP if you're on Mac. And then you need to upload your page to AWS. Again, you can find the instructions on Blackboard, but I think everybody knows how to do that already. So if you don't already have a folder called COMP1006 on the server, I recommend you create one and upload your lab1 page. So your URL will look like this. And you just replace username here with your AWS username. To submit your lab on Blackboard, you need to do 2 things. Upload your PHP page. I don't need the SQL. I've already given you the SQL code, so you don't need to submit that to me. I'm not marking the SQL. Submit your one file, as well as post your link to AWS, so I can actually test out the site in my browser. Okay, I will show you a sample of what this looks like. Bear with me for just a second. I'll start my local server and connect to the VPN. I did build a little sample here. So I'll start my Apache web server. Oh, I need to start my database server as well. So this is what Lab 1 should look like. So this is not my real family. If anyone is a fan of the TV show Shameless, you probably recognize the characters. So I inserted these 7 records in my relatives table. Yep, I'm still catching up on the latest season. I've only seen I think it's the last season, isn't it, Preston? I've seen the first episode of the final season. I haven't seen, I think there's been 4 or 5 more. So I've inserted these 7 records in my relatives table. I've written a query that fetches them, and then I'm using HTML and PHP to display a table, a grid of rows and columns that shows the names, the ages, and everyone's occupation. So this is what I'd be looking for your submission, except it should include you and members of your own family. And you have until next Tuesday at 5 o'clock to submit this. Does anybody have any questions about the lab?
Yes.
Yes, David, we're doing that today.
Where are we?
We actually did it already on our save page, right? When we were saving the game, we built our save game page. So we remote Roastly so why don't I just open it up and we'll look. We may as well open up our gaming site right now. We're going to be working with it again today. So we can actually look at one of the pages. So if I reopen my PHP gaming site, right? So on our save game, we've got all this PHP code for saving, but here's our SQL. So we could insert. Sure, Colton, yes. So you could create a lab folder in htdocs and create the file there to test it, and then you'll upload it to AWS, and you'll give me the actual link, the live link on AWS. The live link will look something like this. So this was my sample. So I got a bunch of labs the other day from students in one of my other sections. So for example, here was one of the students' labs, right? So he gave me the live link and he uploaded the PHP file. So he used Bootstrap for styling. It's not required, but it's optional. It's easy to use. So we'll look at that today. So it was great. I got to go through my Lakehead section and, you know, see what everyone's parents did for a living, see who their siblings were, meet their pets, etc. Okay, so just one page. So you'll upload the one file and you'll give me the link running live on AWS, please. Okay. Are there any other questions about the requirements?
Oh, yeah. Are we going to? Do we have to make
Ariel,
our
I know you can't stick around for the whole class, which is fine. I just want to double check you're good with this, the requirements. Okay, awesome. No, actually, hang on. Sorry, Chris. Let me check my audio because I am not hearing you. Thank you. Okay. Go ahead, Chris.
So, do we have to make our own database, or do we have to like connect to a pre-existing database that you made or something?
Well, you are connecting to your own existing database on AWS. You don't have the ability to create new databases on AWS. You already have one.
So the real task is to connect it.
Sorry, I heard you say, so the real task is, but then your voice cut out again.
Is to connect it, like connect this PHP save game
Exactly.
PHP folder into a database.
Exactly. So you have an existing database already, but you're going to use this code to create a new table inside the existing database. Okay, so you have a database already. You're going to create a table with this code inside it, and then you're going to use this command to populate the records inside of that new table. Does that make sense?
Yes.
And then the PHP page will connect to that database and retrieve and display the information inside this new relatives table.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. And Colton, David, thank you for letting me know. Not sure why I couldn't hear Chris. Does anybody else have any questions about the lab? Okay. So you can find that under the assignments tab, due next Tuesday.
Okay.
So I hope so. So here's what we want to do today. So last week, here's my other really retro. This is me as a graphic designer. So last week we looked at capturing data from a user in a form and connecting and saving it to a database. So it's kind of a one-way process. The data flows from the browser to the database. When we're retrieving data, it's actually a two-way communication. First, we have a PHP page that requests some kind of data. So here I open up this link. I'm making a request to this page to ask for some data. So on Owen's lab1.php, it connects to the database, and there's an SQL select command that goes and retrieves all of the records in the relatives table. And the database sends back the information, and then we use PHP and HTML to render all the data in some kind of formatted way. So in this case, we've used an HTML table tag, so table,thead, th, and then tr and td. We've kind of wrapped or packaged all of the values that live inside the database. So we're combining, as David asked, we're combining PHP and HTML together. Sorry, here for the output. Okay. So what I'd like you to do, we're going to do a short exercise in the breakout group. So I'm going to randomly kind of break up the class. How many students have we got here? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 10. Okay, I think I'm going to create 4 groups. So if you can open up in the lesson 3 folder, there's this item here. It says collaborative query exercise. So open this item up, but please open the file in your browser or click edit in browser if you have that option. Please don't download the file or you will lock it. So this is on this page, we've got all of the steps. I've written them as comments. We have all the steps. There'd be 6 steps we need to retrieve and display the game titles from our games database that we've built together. I guess I should say the title of each game. So here's what we're going to do. I'm going to put you in breakout groups. I'll give you maybe 10 minutes should be enough time. So if you're in breakouts room 1, together, the 3 of you, I want you to edit this document and add the code for section 1 and section 6. That's if you're in breakout room 1. You can add the code to this Word document, shared document online. If you're in breakout room 2, you are going to code sections 2 and 3. So underneath the comments, try and work out what code would need to be here. If you're in group 3, you're going to code section 4. And I've put a link in here that you can check out for some hints. And if you're in breakout room 4, you are going to code section 5. So when we're all finished, we should have one complete page with all the code. I know it's new, which is why I'm just assigning a small piece of it to each group. So I'm going to start the breakout rooms. I'm going to give you 10 minutes to try and complete the code for the sections that are assigned to you. And again, if you're not sure which section you're supposed to do, it's here on Blackboard. Are there any questions before I start the breakout rooms? We will come back together and review all the answers and put together this page and then try it out in about 10 minutes. Okay, I will pause the recording and the sharing and I'll start the breakout rooms. I'm going to put this file together. We've got some good pieces here. We need to make a few adjustments, but that's okay. That was the idea. Okay. So we've got these credentials. Now, we could use MySQL Connect, but that's an old library. So I'm going to suggest maybe we could rewrite this a little bit. So how could we rewrite this using the PDO library? In fact, I think we've already got it down here. So I'm actually, group 3's kind of got it here. This is our database connection using the PDO library. So we're using PDO to connect to MySQL with this host, this database name. We need to modify it a little bit. Our password should come at the end and our username would come in the middle. So we're close. So we'll copy. We're going to just paste that in. And this would be our username. So I'll just comment this out here. So this MySQL Connect, it's not wrong, it's just old. And it only lets us connect to a MySQL database. So we're going to follow the recommendations, which is to use PDO instead. So this will connect us to our database. Here's our query. This looks good. Select star from games. Now, we also want to store this in a variable. So what could we add here so that we could store this query in a variable? Because we'll need to use it a bit later on. So what variable name could we create here that's descriptive? What variable name did we use previously? Yeah, both would be correct. David, that would be a good suggestion. For consistency, I like to just call my variable SQL, and we'll just wrap it in double quotes. So this is the connection we're going to use, connecting to AWS, and here's our SQL query. Our command, I think we maybe got a little bit of confusion between our database connection and the command. So the connection, this is the link between our PHP page and our database. So we want to do this first. So that's why I'm going to use the variable called db, or you could use the variable con. The command is the object that's going to link the database and the query together. So we're going to connect up above. So we're going to modify this a little bit. So how do we link our connection and our SQL together? We take our connection, and it has a method called prepare. So we're combining our connection and our query together in this new variable. And does anybody remember how we actually run the query? We have to call a new method of this command variable. So now we have our we set up our connection, we set up our query, we link them together. And now we need the query to actually, the query transaction to actually fire. So what method would actually run our query? Let's go and look at our save page. On what line, when we set up our insert SQL, which line number actually runs the query here? David's right, this execute. Yeah, and if he said that's right. So we want that same execute call, right? Create the command variable, that's here. and then use it to actually run the query. So we need 2 lines of code. Create the command to link our database connection and our query together, and then actually execute that query. All right, then group 3, we're going to call the fetch all method, that's great, of our command, and we're going to store the result in a variable called games. Great. So now group 4, you probably had the hardest task. For each games as V, so here's our list, we're going to loop through, and we're close here. I'm just going to change the syntax a little bit. We'll actually just can print out this, our V title. So if games is all the games and V is one game, as we loop through our list, we're going to print out the title for each one. But we don't want to close our PHP tag here because we still have to close our connection. We don't use PDO close. So does anybody remember how do we disconnect? It's actually even simpler. So how do we, if we create a connection here, how do we disconnect and get rid of that connection at the bottom? Good guess with PDO close. Right, Ariel, thank you. So I'm just going to change this code. We'll take our connection. We just set it to null. There we go. So we're creating a new PDO connection with our AWS credentials. We're setting up our query to fetch the data from the database. We link our connection and query together with this command variable, and then we run the query. And once this line runs, we should get back a list of data from MySQL. And we do that by calling fetch all. This allows us to store the query results in a variable called games. So now we have a list of rows and columns, and we want to use a loop to print out the title of each game. And then we're going to disconnect. So there's our basic process for selecting a list of data and displaying it. So that's kind of what we're doing in the lab. Exactly this, we just added a little bit of formatting by using rows and columns. Okay, I'm going to leave this code. So this code is up here. It's complete, although we'll have to put our credentials in. It's 5 to 12. So let's take a break here. Michael might need an iced coffee or a hot chocolate or an ice cream. Let's take a break here. When we come back, we'll copy this code into an actual PHP file, and then we can try it out and see if we can actually, how the select actually functions. Okay, so we will take a 10-minute break here. Go stretch your legs, get what you need, and we'll come back at 12:05.